On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Justin. And Justin was married to a controlling drill sergeant. It's a story of being a team player, accusations, isolation, fear, loss of identity, and financial control. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Justin. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here, and if you want to be a guest like Justin is today, go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, click on the guest form at the top of the page, and submit our form. Or send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@pm.me. Also, at our website, we have a new newsletter, and you can receive a free workbook from this episode and all future episodes. And you can also find that at narcissistapocalypse.com as well. And we do have a content warning for today as we do discuss childhood sexual abuse in this episode. So that is your content warning for today. And today you're going to hear Justin's story, and Justin's relationship moved pretty quickly. He didn't really have time to think, and the team player in him just took over, and he became very accommodating to every demand or accusation, no matter how out there it was. He just kept conforming until he was unrecognizable to himself anymore. And I think he'll validate a lot of you out there today. So a big thank you to Justin for being here with us today. And now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Justin, the floor is now yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I guess I can start with a little bit of who I am, and my backstory is that I'm from Portland, Oregon. I am the youngest of 4 kids and from a wonderful family. My parents were married for their entire lives, my entire life. And I come from this really close, wonderful family with 2 older sisters and an older brother. And I got to be kind of the young, fun guy. I was kind of the funny kid. And my parents were just really super supportive of me. And I can't stress enough, like I came from a household where there was just a lot of laughter and family vacations and trips to the beach and sports and art and, one TV where we all sat and watched TV together. And, just absolutely stress-free childhood where, I never met anybody bad. I was just allowed to indulge, and I was encouraged to follow my dreams of being an artist. And I loved skateboarding, and I loved punk music. And then I went through college, and I had a couple girlfriends in college, but never a bad breakup, just kind of, oh, I'm moving to Chicago. Oh, okay. I'm moving to Texas. Oh, whatever. So there was never a bad breakup even. So in some ways I feel so, I guess, lucky to have gone through a good portion of my life without meeting anyone who was like the person we're going to talk about today. But I was such a team player throughout everything. I played sports, and I was a part of these great communities of people, both with, skateboarding and with art and college, even just collaborating with so many exciting people. And then when I graduated from college, I moved in to a warehouse, for kind of a punk house that was filled with artists and eclectic people. And it was just a fantastic time in my life where you were a part of this great community. And, you just gave everything you had because we're all in this together, that kind of thing. Anyway, just a really good sort of first half of my life. And of course, then I met a woman that I was really excited about. And like I said, I'd come from a family where all my siblings were married, had kids. Everybody was in long-term. They're still married now. And my parents were married. So that was for me like, oh yeah, like you invest in this person, like you meet someone and you start family with them. You start, you get married and you have, my dream was to have kids. So I really wanted to be a great husband. I wanted to be a great dad. So I met my first wife. We got married, pretty traditional wedding, shared our lives, and we ended up having a child, my first child, my son. And we kind of shared equally the responsibilities. I was super involved. I was sort of teaching a little bit. I was doing my own sort of freelance artwork. My wife at the time had opened a clothing boutique. And so I had my son half the time, from when he was born. Really fortunate that I was able to be a part-time professor and able to spend a lot of time with my son. And I was really happy to help my wife pursue what she wanted to do. And, it really was just a great collaboration. An opportunity came up to teach at a college in Texas. And I had been teaching part-time in the Portland area. And, my son was about to start kindergarten. And we both agreed, hey, I could go full-time. You can, maybe start a new venture. So we moved to the South. Unfortunately, my first ex-wife, I don't know what happened. We moved, and within 6 months, she had decided that she wasn't in love with me and didn't want to continue the marriage. So I pled with her. I said, oh, we just moved here. Let's give it some time. And maybe it's the shock of moving to a new place and meeting, and maybe having a hard time making new friends or whatever. But we went to marriage counseling, and the marriage counselor, I'll never forget, sort of looked at me and said, you got to stop trying. It's not going to work. So that, was the beginning of the end of that marriage. We divorced through mediation. We agreed to 50-50 custody, which everything was really amicable. There wasn't a lot of anger. I mean, initially, when she kind of wanted to get divorced, I was confused, but I started to understand, or I what are you going to do? We were amicable in the divorce, and had a really good kind of co-parenting relationship. And largely, I'd already been 50-50 custody during our marriage. There were times when I was with my son and times when she was with my son. So it was really natural to move to 50-50 custody.
So let's go back here to this comment that you just made, which was, what are you going to do? And going back to who you are growing up, you are, as you said, a team player. And that is kind of the epitome of who you are and what is going to get you into trouble when we get to the story of the person that the story is about. Because, the way you grew up as part of a team, and you grew up in team environments, and you understood that if someone is lacking over here, I'm going to be a good teammate. If this is going on over here, I'm going to be a good teammate. Oh, it didn't work out. I'm not going to get mad. I'm part of a team. Even though I'm divorced from this person now, we still are raising a child together. I'm still part of a team in some way. So what are you going to do? I'm going to pick up my slack. They're going to pick up their thing. I might overcompensate if they have something going on, and then hopefully that they do the same for me, because you think everything is being done as a team. So if you at one point in your life are down, someone else might pick up the slack for you. In your marriage, you said sometimes you were 50%, sometimes you're a first ex-wife, the other 50%. You had those periods. You understood, the give and take. But that mentality will eventually be taken advantage of in a major way.
Yeah. I wrote down a note that my best qualities ended up making me very vulnerable. So when I say, what are you going to do? It was kind of like through discussion and through mediation and through marriage counseling, I said, oh, she's done. Like, she's not wanting to continue this. And that was, I didn't know that was an option. Like, I was in it for the long haul. I was, like you said, I'm a team player. What do you need? Like, I can do more. I can give more. But it wasn't, she let me know that wasn't going to fix anything.
So after you get divorced, what is your life like for a little bit? And then when do you meet the person that the story is about? And what happens from there?
So I had this house and I'm a single parent for 50% of the time or half my son's week. And I'm teaching college. I'm parenting successfully and really enjoying my time with my young son and being there for him. Maybe dated a little bit, but had, just surviving, I guess, and just kind of making it through as a single dad. My son was, I think, in third grade around this time, and I put myself out there to his teacher. I said, "Hey, I can draw some like cartoon characters, and if you ever want me to come in, I'm happy to talk about my art and show some stuff and teach the kids how to draw some stuff." And she said, "Yeah, of course." It was the end of the school year, and maybe they needed someone to kind of just bring some excitement to the class. So I volunteered. I show up and I did a little workshop with the kids, and I showed them how to draw SpongeBob and how to draw characters, and very successful. Some of the other third grade teachers heard about it, like, "Oh, can you come into my class?" And there was a teacher, and she had asked, "Hey, would you be willing to come in and do the same workshop for my students?" And of course, absolutely, yeah, happy to happy to talk about my stuff, and it had gone so well. So I make an appearance in this class, and it went really well. And the teacher said, "Hey, I took some pictures. Here's my, let's email." And we started emailing back and forth, and she seemed great. F, very welcoming, very kind, very gentle person, and we just had a really great interaction via email back and forth for a few weeks. Started off just innocently, like talking about, maybe the photographs, or I didn't even really think it was a sort of a get to know you type of email scenario. It was just very organic and very natural. So then I suggested, I kind of was like, "All right, hey, do you want to have coffee? Let's maybe meet for coffee and we can talk further." And that's the first date with my second ex. So we go on a first date, and we just really clicked from the beginning. She said she was nervous, which I found endearing, and I didn't know what to expect, so I don't think I was very nervous. But I saw that she was lovely and just seemed like a wonderful mom. She was a single mom. She had 3 daughters from her first marriage, and my son was actually in the class with her daughter. I guess from there we started seeing each other pretty regularly, and I felt comfortable getting the kids together since they all knew each other from school. And it wasn't awkward at all. It was, "Hey, it was fun. Let's all go out and do something." And I found it really nice to share these experiences with another parent who had kids, and it seemed really healthy and also just really fun for my son and fun for me. And it was really nice to get to know her and get to know her kids and see our kids all playing together. So we, dated, I guess, for a relatively short period of time, surprisingly. But the kids all felt comfortable together, which I wouldn't have allowed this to continue if my son wasn't comfortable and having fun. And I felt it was just a really natural thing to get everybody together like that. So, like, I was very naive, I think, to people. I assumed the best of everybody, and I'm very conflict averse. I am a people pleaser. I'm empathetic. I'm compassionate. If I do something wrong, like, it causes me stress and anxiety. I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. So there was a couple early red flags that I didn't know what red flags were. I didn't know these were things I should be looking out for. I'd never had a red flag in my. So one of the first things that happened was I went over to her house one day when I didn't have my son, and I went over to her house for dinner, and we hung out and watched a show with her kids. And I pretty innocently put my phone down on the coffee table, but I put it down face down. And in my head, didn't want any interruptions. I didn't know that that was a problem. And apparently it was a problem. "Why did you put your phone face down?" What are you hiding? And and when somebody confronts me like that, I don't know. I didn't know. Sorry, I didn't know. I didn't know I shouldn't do that. I didn't know that that was maybe an etiquette thing. So I corrected that. I never did it again, which is pretty much the pattern. Is you correct it. So there was a lot of little incidents like that. So even just the turn of a phrase. One time we were sort of in bed, and we had just been at I think a wedding, and we're cuddling or whatever, and I said to her a compliment. I said, "You're the best person I've ever known." Meant to be kind of like, "I'm so thrilled to be with you. You're the best person I've ever known." And abruptly, that changed the entire tone of the evening. What does that mean? The best person you've ever known. What I thought was a compliment had turned into something that had insulted her. That it meant that I've known other people, which, I've been married before. Yeah, I've known other people. Like, and I don't even mean intimately. You're the best person I've known. It the turn of the phrase was somehow taken the wrong way. And I'm sure your listeners can relate that, like, I now needed to be conscious of how I phrased things. And I didn't know that. I did not mean that to be an insult at all. And I was really hurt that something I had meant as a compliment at the end of the night had turned into ruining the night. So I mentioned I come from kind of like a punky background. My first ex-wife was into Riot Girl and zines and music, and so one day my second ex, we were kind of cleaning up some things in my house, and she came across a stack of Riot Girl zines that maybe had a few not sexy photos, but female empowerment, maybe photographs of women in powerful roles. It was not pornography. It wasn't meant to be salacious, or it wasn't meant to be viewed as an X-rated thing. Why do you have these? What are these? Why do you have these? Oh, and my reaction was, oh my gosh, like, oh, those are my first wives. I thought I should return them to her. I'm not looking through them. You can see I'm on my heels at this point. I'm like, oh no, I don't know. Like I can't even catch my breath to even try to explain. And she wouldn't believe me anyway. Like I said, oh, those aren't even mine, which now that I say it, sounds like a cliche. Oh, those are mine. Those belong to somebody else, Well, so I was very much on alert.
So already here, there's early red flags. You're already having fears. You're feeling shame. There is, guilt kind of going on. You feel guilty, for putting your phone down, and you're really walking on eggshells already here. So, besides being a team player or being good enough, what else is kind of going on with you, and how are you rationalizing everything?
I am trying to do better for this person. I'm seeing this person as being someone I want in my life. I really had thought this person's really somebody special. They are really a great mom. They are very kind, and they're very nice, and they seem to be very healthy. And I really want to be with this person. And so when these little things came up, they seemed, like little things, but I could do better. I thought to myself, I can improve that. Oh, that's what you need. You don't want me to do that. I won't do that. It's a message received. I can improve on that.
So in hindsight right here, can you tell us a little bit about this person's family, how it runs, and like who she is in hindsight, who she wanted to be perceived as, and her actions are coming from somewhere. So was there a trauma that was involved here where this is now the way she exists?
Right. So she had always lived in this town in Texas. And when I moved to Texas, I knew, oh, this is going to be the South. This is a little more maybe religious of an area, maybe a little more conservative of an area. Maybe traditional values are something more here than what I saw in Portland, which was a little more sort of, I was in an artistic community, and maybe this was going to be a slight change of a cultural change for me. So I was very sensitive to that. So she had her first child when she was 16, and she was in high school, and married her high school boyfriend at the time. In this community, maybe you get married when you're pregnant, I think was something that I had thought about in my head. She did not reveal to me trauma or much about her childhood until later, when she said her stepfather was a peeping Tom, had peeped in her windows when she was a teen. And I'm very empathetic to that, like to have someone in your life who has experienced trauma like that. I was sensitive to that. I understood that. Even though I did not experience something like that in my childhood, I understood that might make her perhaps sensitive to things, I guess. And I tried to be compassionate with that. I didn't really press, and so I didn't ask a lot of questions out of my attempt to be kind of sensitive to it. And so I think a lot of this stuff, a lot of these red flags were ignored because I was understanding of her past, I guess.
So eventually, around the 6-month mark of dating, you become pregnant. So what happens from here?
I was excited that she was pregnant, and I know it was very early, but I took it in stride, and it was not planned. It was a surprise, and I was so in love with her, and I really thought, wow, like, great. I want this too. Like, I'm excited about this. I had a great relationship with my son, and I thought, great, let's do this. Like, awesome. It was very soon in the relationship, obviously, and my parents hadn't even met her. And but at the same time, I was understanding of like, okay, look, I'm in the South, and she's pregnant. She was very adamant that we get married, and I was agreeable. She told me what ring she wanted. I ran out and got the ring, and our kids get along. You're great. We can make this work. So we had an engagement party, which was all of her friends and none of my family. We sort of rushed to an engagement party with the understanding of this is essentially the wedding, because I want to get married before I'm starting to show a baby bump. And I was like, sure, absolutely. I was very understanding. Team player, as you said, I was a team player. Let's do this. We had this engagement party with all of her friends, all of her teacher friends, her family. And there was not one member of my family and none of my friends at this engagement party. And I'm not really entirely sure why. The promise was, oh, we'll have a party with your family. And I felt like everything was really rushed. There was a real rush to do this. And I hate to say that I was just kind of along for the ride. I was like, okay, yeah, great. All right, team player. So we had this engagement party, which was essentially the wedding. So the actual wedding, like we went to the local hospital and went into the chapel, and there just happened to be a pastor there, and we got married with, like in an afternoon as an afterthought. That's how quick it happened. And it's just looking back, I'm like, my family didn't even know. And it was so foreign to me. I think I was deep down embarrassed, or I knew this would seem too quick. So I was juggling my enthusiasm for this new relationship and a pregnancy, but at the same time, I knew my family would not understand. And that's another red flag that should have gone off or shown to me, is like, hey, if you're not telling your family about this, maybe something isn't right, or something you should slow down, or, hey, pump the brakes. We don't need to get married right away. There's something, I could have maybe been a little more outspoken and directed this to be a little more protective of myself and my son. I'm sure my family was very confused when I told them, hey, I got married. Oh, and by the way, I'm having a kid. That was not like me, and that was not like anybody else in my family. That was just very unconventional. So I had this house that was big house, big enough to fit all the kids, and everybody could have their own room, and her girls could have the upstairs where with their own bathroom. It just seemed like a perfect fit. It wasn't far from where she taught. So she moved in. I single-handedly moved her everything in during one summer. Well, I just was so excited to start this, and I moved all of her stuff into my house, and it just seemed like everything was really, really going well. And I think she's starting to crack down a little at this point. She wants to get rid of all the things that I had. Let's get rid of this. We should buy things that are ours. And it made sense to me at the time. And she wanted to sell the house. We should have a house that's one that we bought together. And I was understanding of that. And she wanted a house that didn't have any traces of my former wife. And that was a mistake. It was to sell that house and move and put her name onto the title of the house. So I bought a new house, and her name is now on that house. And I should say that the birth of my daughter was fantastic. It was an amazing time. Could not have been more in love. I was overjoyed. And I spent a lot of time getting up late at night with my daughter, taking my daughter to school. I have a really flexible school schedule where I was able to get up and take care of my daughter, make sure everybody had lunches for school or for work, and I could get dinner put into the crock pot. I was really like doing everything I could to make things go well for everyone, for the kids to get to know each other and feel comfortable together, and just support her when she was going to work, and take care of my daughter, take my daughter to daycare. So yeah, I was really like I keep going back to just being a really good, trying to help everyone, trying to just give as much as I could.
So, right here, besides you being a good guy, being a team player, things start to go fast. They start to rush. They start to speed up. You're not able to think. You're already walking on eggshells because of blowups. So you're not putting your foot down. You're not putting the brake on. You love this person. You like this person. You think this person likes you too and loves you too in the exact same way. But there's a lot of things that you're doing to make sure that these things are going that way. You know, you want to be good enough. So all of a sudden, you know, these blowups aren't going to happen, but these things are rushing. They're going. You're unable to put your foot on the brake right here. All of a sudden, your house is gone. It is now both of your homes. But right here, you've gone along with things. And for this person to exist with you in their life, you have to conform to everything.
And this is very much the pattern where I sort of just go along, and I give something up incrementally. Okay, well, I didn't put my foot down on this, or I should have stood up for myself on this. I should have drawn a boundary here, but instead I'm just going along. You know, I'm acquiescing. I'm constantly like becoming a little bit less of myself and a little more compliant and a little more of what I think she wants, or what would fit in, or what would create the least conflict. As I'm sure your listeners can completely understand. It's like you become less of yourself.
And right here, after the house sells and you now go into the new house after you buy the new house, well, now things are really locked in. New house, married, child, you know, you're locked in here. Everyone is there together. So now more things that you can be nitpicked on or put down with, or whatever that's going to be, that's moving goalposts that you'll never be able to fulfill, will really start to come, because now they're secure. You're locked in. So tell us what happens from here.
So you're absolutely right. I feel even more now isolated. Friendships fell away at her recommendation. Oh, you shouldn't be friends with that person. They don't sound like a good friend. Why do you have that? You should get rid of that. You should sell that. Why do you even have that? she had sort of taken over. Hey, I'll pay the bills. I'm really good with numbers. I'll take care of all the bills. We immediately had a joint account, and all my direct deposit, anything from work would just go into this account. And I was blissfully unaware, like, just, okay, yeah, you do that, like, you take care of that. And she seemed to be passionate about taking over the finances. Huge mistake. Obviously, I became completely unaware of what was happening. I knew that we never had money. And I just figured, well, I'll just take on extra classes. I'll take on more work. I can earn my way out of this. I can continue to take more and more on to get us out of this, this sort of any debt we might have. So I acquiesced control over sort of what was happening with the finances of the house. And also, like, she became religious. She wanted to go to church. And I thought, well, okay, that's not necessarily my thing, but I'll go with you to church and support this interest that you have. And that was really, I thought, healthy and fine. And I was becoming a part of this sort of church community that she seemed excited about. But it wasn't me. Like, that wasn't something that I was about. But I thought it was harmless to kind of support her and her interests. I was very giving, almost giving to a fault, definitely to a fault, where I was getting up, making everybody's lunches, making everybody's breakfast, getting my daughter dressed and ready for daycare. I would take her to daycare. I would rush to work. I would pick up my daughter from daycare, make dinner, make sure there was food. The entire day was spent facilitating this family and making sure everybody was taken care of. And I just gave and gave and gave, and became less and less of myself and less of there wasn't really any room for me in my own head. And certainly nobody seemed very interested in helping me. When that works well and everybody's giving, it's a great family. If somebody feels taken advantage of, it starts to get, I gave until I broke, basically. So parenting wise, it was really challenging for me to have a voice as a parent. She had her daughters, and my son was around, at this point, they're fourth grade, fifth grade, and she became the head of the household as the parent. And I became very much a second fiddle parent, even to my own son, who I had this great relationship with. And he kind of got sacrificed into this family. And I sacrificed my role as a father to be there for everyone. And that's one of my greatest regrets, is that I couldn't be the parent I wanted to be. I was fearful. I was afraid of this person. I was walking on eggshells, and I didn't know how to kind of stand up for myself or stand up for my time with my son, because now I was a part of this big group, and I had stepdaughters, and I had a new baby. And I really feel sad about that I wasn't able to spend that time with my son the way I really wanted to. If I can give you an example, like when we first moved into the house, I was painting every room in that house. I was, doing all the stuff you do when you move into a house. I painted everybody's room. I moved everything in. I did it all. And one day I took just a few minutes. I had found some curtains in a closet somewhere that had been left behind by the previous owners. And I hung the curtains in my son's room, and, just during some downtime. It wasn't a big deal. She became very angry with me that I had taken that time to do that for him. And I felt like it was a necessary thing to put curtains on my son's windows, but I was scolded for doing that. Like, that was a waste of time. We have other things that are more important or more pressing to do. And it was just another chip away at, like, my son me getting to do something special for my son, or for me to make my son at home. It was more important to her that her kids are at home in this place. And, unfortunately, it was just another thing that I kind of sacrificed. Okay, sorry. Pretty simple thing to have tried to do for my son.
So eventually things start to escalate even further, and you have a lot of incidents that are going to occur which is going to show, patterns of control, and accusations are going to happen. And there's a lot of paranoia that is going to be there. And then I think eventually you're going to discuss isolation aspects as well. So walk us through a bunch of these incidents that started to occur.
Things escalated. You're right. And there was this kind of strategic chipping away that when you hear some of these incidents, or as I think about these incidents, they're absurd. They make no sense. How did I ever think that these were normal things? But it's because of the pattern. This is where I was. And so I'll never forget this. This one is, I think, a really pivotal moment for me. Our daughter was now old enough that he could stay with the grandparents. Now, keep in mind, my ex-wife had said, my stepfather is a peeping Tom. And why to this day that I thought, oh, well, they must have resolved it because she seems okay with him. He comes over. So we left my daughter with them for the weekend, and we were going to drive up and, to kind of like, see waterfalls and see some scenic sights, and we go on this trip and everything was great. We stayed in an Airbnb and it was very romantic and just could not have been more in love with this person despite everything. I was like, wow. And we were able to finally spend time together. We kind of called this like our honeymoon. And it was the last day there for the weekend. And we were seated in like an outdoor restaurant. And I was just eating pizza, just blissfully sitting there, like zoning out. And all of a sudden she said, why are you looking at that woman? And I snapped out of my, what? I wasn't looking at anybody. What? You were looking at that woman. Why were you staring at that woman? And there was a woman across, 50 feet, 60 feet away. I was like so shocked that I had been accused of this because it wasn't what I was just zoning out. And I could not explain. She wouldn't allow me to. It was true to her. And even if I said, no, I wasn't, it was already the truth. And me trying to explain it away wasn't being heard. So the entire drive home, I think a 4 or 5 hour drive home, we just didn't speak because I was shocked and silenced. I couldn't think of a way to explain it. It just wasn't something that I had done. And finally, I think she said, well, if you say you didn't do that, I'll believe you. And so it wasn't an apology. It was just kind of like, for me, be on alert, watch your eyes. Don't make eye contact. Don't look somewhere that could be misconstrued. That was a big one for me. Another one that happened, we went to see her favorite band and went to this concert and stayed in a hotel after the concert. We moved into the room, and so I turned on the TV, and I'll never forget that Ocean's 11 was on the TV, and I wasn't even really watching it, and I didn't realize, but there's a scene, and it's in the background. There's like burlesque dancers in the background. She comes out of the bathroom. Why are you watching this? Why didn't you turn this off? Why didn't you look away when this was on the screen? And it was another dumbfounded expression of like, what? I said, I think we have this on DVD at the house. Like this, it wasn't like I had ordered a pornographic movie. This was just in the background. We didn't talk the rest of the night. Another one, we didn't talk the ride home. I don't think we talked for a week after that. And then these sort of silent treatment type of moments or weeks would be, eventually you don't apologize, or she didn't apologize and I didn't apologize. You just kind of move on, and it never gets healed, and it never gets any sort of moment of understanding. So I just moved on. And then I knew even more. Hey, don't put the TV on. Better watch out, put me on alert. Watch your eyes, watch what you're looking at. This person can get upset at the drop of a hat. So this kind of chipping away at things I could do, things I felt comfortable doing, or things I didn't feel comfortable even in my own skin because I didn't know if I was doing something wrong at some point. even to the point where, so she had a dog when we got married, we were dating and got married. She had a very big dog. This dog was like 180-pound, gigantic dog, nicest dog in the world. I really loved this dog. And so after everything was done during the day, after the kids were bathed and everybody went to bed, I said, I got to give this dog a walk. Like, nobody cares for this dog. And it was just the sweetest big boy, you know? So at 11 o'clock at night, you know, maybe she's putting maybe her girls to bed or something. I would take the dog on a walk to the park. And it was just, for me, it was like, what more can I give? I'm going to give one more thing. I'm going to give this dog a nice walk. You know, maybe I'm going to pick up some firewood. Maybe we'll have a fire. We'll sit by the fire. You know, so I would walk the dog. And even that, she thought I was meeting someone at the park at 11 o'clock at night. She said, you know, are you meeting someone? Why are you so eager to walk the dog? Are you meeting someone? And it was one of those things, like, slap your forehead. Like, no, it's 11 o'clock at night. I'm not setting up some clandestine meeting with someone. And it just, like, these things started to become more and more absurd to me. Like, there was no explanation that would make sense. You know, you could say, no, of course I'm not meeting anybody at the park. It's right down the street. When am I setting up these meetings? You know, even the smallest thing. One time my son was getting picked up. His mom was due to arrive to pick him up for her time. And I was bold enough to peek out the window to see if her car had pulled up. Why are you looking out there? Why did you do that? What are you looking for? I can't even look out the window. Like, I'm not sneaking a surreptitious glance of my ex-wife. I mean, like, I was married for 10 years. Like, we're divorced. I'm not trying to sneak a peek out the window. Like, I'm just seeing if she arrived. I'm anxious at all times.
So here you have all of these incidents where you're being accused of things that are not true, specifically here when it comes to women and who you might be walking with or meeting or seeing or looking at in all of these ways. So that has you not just walking on eggshells, this kind of freezes you in life as a whole from being able to make any kind of decisions. I mean, it's just like decision paralysis in a lot of ways, because it's like, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. No. So,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm already the type of person who is thinking things through, trying to be accommodating, making mental notes. Oh, this person wants this, not this. And so I'm making small adjustments to the way I live in order to make things go smoother and to not fall into these sort of conflicts again and again. I'm trying desperately to correct my behavior.
So this correcting of the behavior continues, and then more isolation occurs. So talk to us about this.
Well, so I already didn't have many friends anymore because they were deemed, oh, that person's no good. Or, you know, I kind of read into this and said, oh, maybe I limited how many friends I had. I didn't have social media. I wasn't allowed to have social media. And social media was, why do you need that? Who's going to be in touch with you? Who are you trying to be in touch with? You know, so I didn't have social media. She had her social media, but I can see that I no longer had connections to the outside world. I was isolated. I didn't have friends. The friends that I did have were her friends' husbands. And, you know, you're standing around a barbecue turning hot dogs. These weren't really people that I was friends with. They were just kind of acquaintances. But those were my new friends, I guess. These dads that I had nothing in common with. I couldn't watch a movie, like we said, because of the Ocean's 11 incident. I never sat and watched a movie or a TV show. If a TV show came on that had a sex scene, that was forbidden. Game of Thrones, I missed Breaking Bad. I missed cultural moments that maybe I could have shared with coworkers. I didn't know any, you know, it's like didn't know anything about anything because it was all forbidden. was solely there to provide and serve this family. So even times when I wasn't with her, if I bumped into maybe a female neighbor at the grocery store and I said hello, I wondered, do I need to report about this? Am I going to get in trouble later if she finds out that I said hi to the neighbor? Just self-correcting myself, even when she wasn't there. Like, oh, I shouldn't have this on, or I shouldn't look at that, or I accidentally bumped into the neighbor at the supermarket. So just chipping away, I'm less and less. I'm more of a shell. I don't have much at this point. I found myself becoming more and more anxious. I never knew what was the right thing to do. Am I doing the right thing now? Should I say this? Should I not? And even like the moment I finished my class, I got a text, "Are you on the way?" And that caused me a lot of anxiety. Like I couldn't even run to the bathroom. I couldn't clean up my classroom. "Are you on the way?" I can't tell you, it seems like such a simple thing, but it caused me a lot of stress to think that I had to, as soon as class was over, I had to run out that door and be back. So to this day, text messages cause me stress.
So eventually you took a risk and started to skateboard again. And this changed a lot of things inside of you. So walk us through this.
So I was getting up early, getting my daughter dressed, making the lunches, getting everybody fed, and I didn't have to work until a little bit later in the morning. So I had a window of time where my daughter had to be at daycare at 9 a.m. at the latest. I didn't have to work until maybe an hour after that, hour and a half later. So they had built a new skate park in my town, and I hadn't skateboarded in a long time. But as a kid, I loved skateboarding. I loved being a part of this community, and I loved, the attitude, and I loved the physical activity. So they built this skate park not far from where I was dropping my daughter off for daycare. So I got a skateboard and I started going to the skateboard park in the morning. And I can't tell you how important it is to find a hobby or a physical activity, even if you stink at it. Like it made me feel so good that I was able to do that. I felt like $1,000,000 for the first time. Oof, oh, I'm getting a little choked up. Who knew skateboarding could do that? But to be a part of this thing that I enjoyed. So I started meeting people and I started skateboarding with these people, other dads my age. And I started making friends and I felt really good. And I felt something about the physical aspect of it and the kind of camaraderie. There was no turning back after that. Like that was a turning point for me. I felt good about myself. And importantly, I met dads and husbands whose wives supported them. They were there. I met these guys had wives there. And I said, "Your wife supports this?" And he was like, "Of course. Why wouldn't she?" And I didn't have that. So that was an interesting window into another type of marriage that I was not familiar with. So I started to feel good about myself, and that allowed me a bit of a sense of confidence. I had a sense of confidence, and I had a sense of self. I knew I found myself again, and that was the end for this. I was not going to put up with this anymore. So some things started to slowly happen. I started to put my foot down. I started to maybe create some boundaries. I started to sort of say to myself, "Oh, there's no amount of giving that's going to fix this. You can give, and it's not going to be enough for this person." I'll never forget. I even had a thought one time. I said, "Well, maybe when she retires, when we retire, things will get better." And I caught myself immediately and I said, you'll be dead. That's 25 years away. that's so long from now. You're going to wait that long? You know, a voice in my head said, you got a lot of life left to live here. You can fix this. So I saw that I was afraid of her. I saw that my son was afraid of her. I saw that all the kids in the house were afraid of her. I saw that I couldn't be the parent that I wanted to be. I couldn't be the parent to my son that I wanted to be, that I knew I could be. And I couldn't be the parent to my daughter because I was living in fear and I was a shell of a person. And I knew, I was like, I'm a good dad. You know, I'm a good person. I haven't done anything wrong. And this person has made me feel less than myself, has made me scared. And something about skateboarding just unlocked a sense of power in myself. And I started to say, hey, you know, let me parent my son. Don't parent around me. Like, let me take the lead on parenting my son. Like you know, you're not going to believe this, but in that moment, I was saying, hey, let me parent him. She looked over my shoulder and said, hey, go take a shower. Go get in the shower, to my son. And I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Let me tell him to take a shower. You know, I just said, like, let me parent him. It was such a small ask. And in the moment, she couldn't even allow it. So I did a few things that started to like make me feel a little more awake as to what was going on. One of the things that happened was she had come back from IKEA. She went away for the weekend with her kids and came back from IKEA with a lot of purchases. And I was scraping by. I was taking on extra work. And, you know, I was trying to make a can of beans into a meal. Like, we had no money. I was sacrificing everything to even just get food to build enough of a dinner for these kids that we had. And so I looked at the purchases and I ended up finding the receipt. And she had spent nearly $1,000 at IKEA. And I asked her, I said, what did you buy? Like, we don't have any money. We don't have money to do this. Oh, well, you know how things go. And I thought, I didn't lose it. I just thought to myself, you know, how irresponsible. Like, I'm really trying very hard and working all I can. And this person is taking, and, you know, the injustice of that rocked me. So I went on to all the bank accounts. I went on to all the credit cards and I started looking through stuff, and I started to notice, oh my gosh, you spent $300 at the salon. You spent $400 this month at Starbucks. To get the nails done was $300. I saw all these frivolous purchases and I said, this is why you wanted to take over the finances. Like, I said to myself, this is what she's been hiding. I looked at my retirement fund. It had been slowly draining, $1,000 here, $1,000 there. She had accounts open in her name. I didn't have any. I didn't have a credit card. I had nothing. I didn't realize she had all these credit cards in her name, and, you know, a Victoria's Secret card with the balance on it. We were in debt, and I say we. The things that I had my name on, I started to become determined. I'm going to pay these off, and I'm going to take my name off of all this stuff. And so I worked all summer to make enough money to pay off any debt. I was like, I'm getting out of this financial responsibility. My father had been so responsible and had set up this retirement account and these, these sort of portfolios for me when I was in high school. And he just had told me, hey, don't look at them. Don't take money out. Just let them build. And he had passed away. And this was, you know, something that I really was hurt by, that she had slowly drained these accounts without me knowing. You have to understand, this person knew the account numbers by heart. She knew the security numbers by heart. She could forge my signature. She knew how to log into everything. And I had no knowledge. And it's unbelievable to me that I was so unaware. So I took over the finances. I paid everything off, closed anything that had my name on it. I opened up my own bank account. And this is another one, the beginning of the end. You know, when I was confident enough to say, hey, no more of this. Like, I'm not going to do this anymore. This is financial ruin. I'm being financially taken advantage of. My earning potential is now weaponized. Like, you're taking my ability to earn and you're wasting it. And instead of holding that dear as something that we could help to build this family, you're losing all of our money. So we started going to marriage counseling, and it was a religious marriage counselor. At this point, I had exited the church, that church that she wanted to go to. I said, I went through a period where I said, this church believed this about gay marriage. This church believes this about the dinosaurs. This church believes this about demons. Those things are false. I do not believe those things. And a big moment for me was saying, I'm not going to that church anymore. I believe in the rights for gay people to marry. I believe in the rights for trans people to be seen and not feel like they are sinners. And I didn't go to church anymore. And so it was a little strange that we went to a religious marriage counselor. That was what she wanted to do. So I'm a team player. I went to that marriage counselor, and I even went to, I went there alone sometimes, and sometimes we went together. And I in my head, I knew marriage counseling wasn't going to work, but I said, I'm going to this and we'll see what happens. And the marriage counselor, I don't feel as successful, and you guys can believe what you want. I don't know that when you get to this point, I don't think marriage counseling is going to do much, but it did lead to her making attempts. And one night we're sitting by the fire, this was the only time when we ever talked or got together. And we're sitting by the fire, and she had printed out all of those emails from when we were first in touch, and had presented them to me. And hey, I printed these out, and we used to be like this. And I thought, wow, that was a really sweet thing. And I said, that's really nice that you printed those out. And I said, I would really like to be in that place with you again. And again, that turn of a phrase offended her. I said, I would like to be in this place with you again. And I really meant it. Like I really wanted to work on it. I was really wanting to work on it with her again. And I guess the word again was what did it. She tore those emails up and threw them into the fire. And I was like, I think I was very calm. I said, I think you're misunderstanding the phrasing of that. I mean, like, I want to be there with you. I think that was very romantic. I think that was very nice. I want to be there with you with that. And it was too late at that point. She had torn it up. She had thrown it in the fire. She said, what your problem is? You haven't found God. And I started laughing, which was probably the worst response you could imagine. I didn't know. And what else? What are you going to do when somebody says that? You haven't found God. I just started laughing because it had dawned on me in that moment. There's nothing you can say. There's nothing that's going to make this right. This woman has already made up her mind. So my nature is just to laugh. And I started laughing. And that was the worst response. So she stormed off, and we never spoke again, really. 8 months I slept in the kids' playroom on the couch. So I contacted a lawyer. I wanted to try to get 50-50 custody. That's what I was familiar with. That's what I thought would work. So I gave her my parenting plan, my divorce paperwork, and I said, I think this is fair. She would get half the house, she would get child support, and it would be 50-50 custody. She took it without saying a word. And then the next day I got served divorce papers by the sheriff. And I said to myself, oh, this is going to be bad. Like this is going to be a rough divorce. And it really was just a divorce of just some of epic proportions in terms of how bad it was. I mean, it really was bad.
You knew divorce was someone who was amicable. You did not know divorce was someone who was a high conflict person who it's their way or the highway. You've been living their way or the highway for a long time, doing it their way. But when you say no, all gloves are off.
Exactly. Yeah. This was a real surprise to me. So the divorce was terrible. I was being made out to be such a monster, and to sit through that was brutal. Even me crying, I cry a lot. even me crying, that's crocodile tears. You're faking it. I was made out to be a terrible father. I was made out to be an abusive husband. I was made out to be obviously the opposite. It was like, and it's really hard to prove that in court. It's hard. It's really challenging. So I didn't get 50-50 custody. I lost half the house. I lost half my retirement. I paid child support, obviously, and was left really with very little.
So you're left with very little, but it's over in one sense. You still have to deal with, co-parenting or parallel parenting. So how does that go?
So here's the bright side of that is you're starting with nothing, and I'll be darned if I wasn't overjoyed. I was happy to be out of there. I had a new house. I can't tell you the joy I felt. I moved. I didn't want to know where I was moving. I just was very scared and I just was really traumatized, honestly. I packed up my car. I moved myself. Of what little I had, I just put in my car and I drove to the house that I'm in now, and pulling in the garage and having the garage door closed behind me was awesome. I was like, I was safe. I could just take a moment to myself, and I started to rebuild from there. I was able to be the parent I wanted to be, even though I had my daughter less time. She got to see me be myself, and that was a big win for me. So I just became the best parent with that time that I could. And I built the best relationship with my daughter, and I saw my son be himself, and he got to see me not be afraid, and I got to be fun. I was really overjoyed, and I was rebuilding. I rebuilt so quickly. Financially, I saved so much money immediately. I'm like overjoyed even telling you. I made friends and was able to do things I wanted to do and watch a show that I wanted to watch or read a book that I wanted to read. I just flourished. And, I can't tell your listeners that the other side of it is unbelievable. It's great. So, of course, co-parenting with this person is a nightmare. It's a never-ending challenge. You're still at war. There's still the battle. So I don't know if your listeners are like this, but I was so giving and I was so kind and I just bent over backwards. But the moment that gets abused, I became just the absolute warrior, for my children, like I was gonna get my time with my kids. I wasn't gonna let my ex-wife sort of take advantage of my time or try to take my time from me. I read that parenting plan and I followed it, and I made sure that I got everything that, the holidays that I was going to get, the pickup time and drop off time to the second. I was going to follow that plan. And I just watched my ex-wife constantly take and try to manipulate and, come to my door unannounced, try to manipulate my daughter through text messages or through phone calls. And I just really had to become a fierce defender of my parenting time. And to the point where I started to notice that she was disappearing with my daughter. She was having my daughter sleep overnight with boyfriends at boyfriends' houses, just really bending and breaking a lot of the rules that we had agreed to in the parenting plan. So I have to always monitor that. I have to document everything. And I ended up having to file a contempt of court. I said, hey, I hired a private investigator. He took photos to show that your boyfriend is living at your house. The parenting plan says you can't have a a romantic partner sleepover when you're with your child. And she got a restraining order against me for that. And I had to go to court. And so I lost contact with my daughter for about a month and a half, where I wasn't able to communicate with her. I wasn't able to see her or even send her a card. Everything got returned to me. And that really hurt, to get a restraining order. So I ended up going to court in defense, I guess, to defend myself against this restraining order. It got thrown out within a minute. The judge took a look at it, saw that it was vindictive, and the judge saw that. And I ended up not only getting the restraining order thrown out, but receiving my attorney fees paid for by her, which she then refused to pay. And I had to get a wage garnishment. You learn a lot, you learn a lot. I didn't know anything about the court system, and I would say I've learned a lot, and you just learn as you go. And you're not going to know how to do all this stuff, but as new things emerge, you figure it out. You say, oh, now I've got to go to magistrate court to get a wage garnishment. Okay. How does that work? I poured myself into being a support for my daughter. So that's where I am today. I want my daughter to have the same childhood that I had, and stability and normalcy. And I wanted to try to protect her. And I feel like it's a real struggle.
So, with all of that has occurred, still dealing with this stuff, how has your healing process been? Where are you right now? What's your frame of mind? What have you been working on?
Yeah. I have gone to several therapists over the years and found that they were not super experts on these types of personalities. And I found that I kind of I'd already done some reading. I'd already listened to some podcasts. I was pretty familiar with what these patterns were. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts, like I'm sure your listeners do. I mean, I listened to this podcast, and hearing everyone's stories, so relatable. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all part of the same stuff, and I know for mine, I wasn't, some of these stories might not seem like a big deal, but it's all part of the same type of manipulation and the same patterns. So just even listening to survivor stories is so powerful to me, like it's in some way, like we all shared so much of the same stuff. How is that possible? Like when I hear your stories, I'm like, yeah, I know what that's like. Yeah, I got that one. So I've been, obviously taking care of myself. I try to get physical activity. I try to feel good about myself. I have a wonderful girlfriend who has been with me. We've been together for several years, and she also went through a similar abusive marriage. It's great to be with people who understand. And I've met so many people who know this story that we commiserate, and that's really helpful to me. So I've been, I think, working on that and listening and learning and reading. And it kind of dumbfounds me how similar all of our stories are. But at the same time, I think there's something that is helpful about hearing the stories, even if a lot of it repeats. I'm like, yeah, I know what that's like. Yeah, I recognize that. So I've made new friends. I've made so many friends through skateboarding, so many friends through, just community activities and going to the skate park. And I mean, it's just, it's a whole new world. And I'm so much myself. And I know, like I look back at who I was, and I was like, I do not recognize that person. But I don't beat myself up about, how did I let that happen? How did I let, you said something the other day about the narrowing path that really resonated with me, where it's like that person who went through that was tricked. They were conned. They were broken down. They were chiseled away at until, I don't recognize that person anymore. That wasn't me. And I'm not that, I wouldn't be that person now. And I wouldn't let those things happen to me now. But I'm pretty forgiving of myself. Like I was a nice person. I was a compassionate person. I was a kind parent and a kind and generous husband. And I got taken advantage of. But I've moved on. I'm rebuilding, and that's okay.
So, Justin, if you had any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
Well, getting out of the house and doing things that you enjoy doing. Take a martial arts class. Go find people in a community that may be something you're interested in. And you make new friends and you meet people who are healthy, hopefully. And so getting out, just going skateboarding, made me feel so good about myself. So whatever that does, if I know it's not going to be skateboarding for you, but find that thing that you enjoy doing, and I swear it changes you. So finding a hobby, maybe a community of people, is crucial. I also have forgiven myself, I think, for like, I know that was tough for my son to go through that, and we're trying to heal, and I know my daughter's still going through it, but there's no shame in me helping myself, helping my kids. I'm not embarrassed to tell people these stories. Like, you don't have to be embarrassed. You can say, yeah, I got tricked. I got taken advantage of. That's not embarrassing to you. That's embarrassing to that other person. I think a lot of people there's this idea of like sticking around, the sunk cost. Like, I've invested so much time into this. I gotta stick with it. It's like, no, you don't. You can just get out of this. There's no shame. Like, just tell people what happened and get out, and they'll be understanding more than you think. You're not going to be judged. If anything, you're a champion. Like, you are a brave, courageous person for just doing what you had to do. Like, I had to get rid. I lost everything, and that was really scary. But gosh darn it, I'm so happy now. So, also, one last bit of advice is, you really owe it to your kids. I was a shell of a person. I was not the dad I wanted to be. So, being the version of yourself that you think those kids deserve, you know? And so I got out of there relatively quick. Like, that marriage, I think for me only lasted 5 years. And I got out of there. I'm thankful that I was brave enough to say to myself, like, I can fix my son's childhood. I can get out now and repair this. Like, I can give him what's left of his childhood before he becomes a teenager. Like, I can rebuild this. And so get out and don't be embarrassed. Be the best version of yourself, that version that has been chipped away at. Like, find it again.
Well, Justin, I really want to thank you for being with me here today, sharing your story of being a team player and having your team turn against you. But, you really did a good job of being clear, which is not easy to do, and, showing people who've been dealing with their own version of what you dealt with, which was a lot of accusations and always being put on your back foot and just trying to, put out a fire in any way that you could, even though there was no fire, but you were told there was a fire and now you're putting it out. And by putting it out, it meant that you became smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And everyone right now is just happy that you're back to being, your regular self again, that you're back to full size again. Yes, these things have affected you. They affected your family in a lot of ways, but now it's time for the healing to occur. And obviously, you're going to have to be there for your daughter, going forward as much as possible. But everyone is happy that you're in a good place to be that dad that you need to be and want to be.
Thank you. And I thank you for what you do, but also to the people who share their stories. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to put together the sort of everything that happened to you. And I do know that there's so many more stories that people have. Like, I just shared the tip of the iceberg. And I know for the listeners or the people that share their stories on your show, that's just a small glimpse into their lives. And I want to thank them because it's meant so much to me to listen to them, and it's been really helpful.
Well, thank you, Justin, for being our guest once again. And if you want to be a guest like Justin was today, go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, fill out our guest form, press the submit button. And we also have a new newsletter. Everyone finds it useful. You can get a free workbook, a downloadable workbook in that newsletter from this episode and future episodes. If you sign up to our newsletter, people find it very helpful. A lot of insights into what's going on in their own relationship inside them as well. So join our newsletter at narcissistapocalypse.com today. And that is it for today's survivor story, today's episode. So for myself and Justin, we hope you have a good night.